Comments, questions? All right, Ms. Terry. There you are.
Hello, I'm Melinda Terry, Central Valley Flood Control Association. Yes, so first of all, we met with the staff a couple times, so I appreciate them trying to narrow it down. But I probably agree with you a little bit as well that there are other planning efforts going on, because this falls under, agree with the goal of what you're trying to do, but you're targeting the wrong people. We do think under the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, ultimately you may have some projects that would talk about setbacks, and then that might be dealt with. Same with BDCP. In some of these locations, the way I understand the water diversion facilities in particular, they will actually set back that levee. Unfortunately, it won't be habitat, just so you know, it's going to be a big facility. But, okay. But that doesn't mean that adjacent to that they couldn't build that into their project.
What's your reaction to the suggested revision?
So the problem is it didn't address the issues that we really brought to light when we talked to them. One is, and it was brought up earlier, is the cost analysis that was done for your plan. What it failed to do was to look at what the annual budgets are of a Delta RD, because again, this is targeting a Delta RD who has a rehab or reconstruction levee project. The average for them is $120,000 a year with $50,000 for levies. And so when we brought that up, the staff, of course, immediately said, well, then it's not feasible for them to build it. And so we said, great. Then why would you, because the way it's written, they would still have to analyze doing it. And according to their analysis, it says it's a 20% increase in levee project planning costs to implement this measure.
Well, but this language, as I understand it, reduces the area that must even consider setback levies. And I'd assumed you'd be in favor of that, but I guess I'm wrong.
Well, I said it's better, but it ignored the foundation of what we said the problem with it was, which is if you have a Delta RD that its annual budget is $120,000 a year, and to set back a levee it costs $1.5 million per mile, they're never going to have the money to do the project. And they kind of agreed and went, oh yeah, you're right. But again, your cost analysis, because it failed to really look at what the annual budgets of
how many of your districts are now, under this proposed language, would be excluded from the provision?
I don't know, because I can't quite tell from this map which ones.
It would be helpful. I would wager that it might be a significant portion of your membership excluded from it.
Well, again, it was better because at least now everyone doesn't have to analyze it, but then you're still leaving those small districts that have a $120,000 budget to a 20% increase in levee project costs that previously, when it was everywhere, would have been $3 to $7.5 million per year to just do the extra analysis. But, why would you have them analyze it if you know that they don't really have the money? There may be money, though, in these other programs that are going on, whether it's BDCP and they want to fund some setback levies because they're going to get credit in their HCP under that, or under the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan that the state, as part of its state plan of flood control that it has owns, that they may want to make changes to that system and state money comes in, that's different. But these budgets cannot handle that. And when you set back a levee, that local district now has the additional burden of maintaining the extra habitat that's talked about in this provision, because it's to expand floodplain and create habitat. And again, your cost analysis didn't really look at what those costs are. And we have had districts to do them, so I encourage them in their cost analysis to go and look at what those annual maintenance costs are to that local maintainer now for that habitat that's been created. And then you have the same issue that I brought up on the other measure, which again is if any of these are then able to be credited to PDCP in their conservation measure, then we can't really charge them. We're kind of hampered, number one, by something called Proposition 218. The reason in your regulation giving for doing this proposal is to evaluate the feasibleness of doing setback levies to increase floodplains and riparian habitats. Both of those are considered to provide broad public benefits. So for instance, the flood protection part, there's a small portion that applies to those that are paying for that levee project that might be behind the levee. But if you're setting it back, now you're creating increased flood protection for others in addition to that. And the habitat just has broader general public benefit and potentially is being credited in somebody else's ESA take permit that those people don't apply to. The habitat, the annual budgets, I already mentioned that, but the Proposition 218 prohibits us from assessing for paying for broad general benefits. The two primary limiting factors in Proposition 218, which is a constitutional measure that trumps this regulation, is special benefits and proportionality. So the RD assessments can only assess landowners for the special benefits that their particular parcel receives from the additional flood protection and habitat that you would be talking about in that thing. All of the other general benefits that aren't specific to that parcel, we need another funding source. So I guess my point is, again, it's a good goal, but we won't be able to get there just by having these projects. We're going to need to identify in your Delta plan and the regulation where those other funding sources are, because under Proposition 218, we will not be able to pay for that whole project, even if we could. And then also you potentially, the liability issue, if we're somehow being delayed from doing our projects because of requirement to I guess, analyze. We have to save up our money longer, basically, to get the additional money to analyze the setback. And then finally, suitability. When we had the discussion last week with the staff, one of our engineers gave the example of Bolden Island. It apparently has 50 feet of peat soils, which if you try to put something on it, they sink. And if you're doing a setback levy, it's a good example. It's heavy. You have to do it in phases, which really actually increases the cost. So again, going to your cost analysis. And the city of Stockton found this out with the peat swales with their sewer plant, where the engineers, the local reclamation district tried to tell the sewer districts, please do it in phases because you're going to sink. And they have, and they've had a 13-foot movement that their pipes started to buckle. And so it does add to the cost, so you might want to look at that as well.
This is about money and who should pay for it, and your position is the state and the feds ought to pay for the money primarily.
Their portion of it. Again, we can only pay for the portion that is under 218 that we can assess them for.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's a tax.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Terry.